Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. It's the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, Mike Tagliere, Kyle Yates, and we are talking draft prospects because, once again, this is draft week. Just in case you didn't know, just in case no one mentioned it to you, I'll be the first to tell you that the NFL Draft is happening on Thursday night, and it's happening here on Fantasy Pros live, so make sure you're going to our YouTube channel, you are clicking subscribe, and you are clicking that notifications button so you know exactly when we are starting on Thursday night with our live coverage of the NFL Draft, fantasy style. It's going to be the three amigos, the three of us, talking football, having some fun, wearing ties, who knows, maybe a cocktail or two. We'll see where the night goes, but it's going to be a great time, and we want you to be a part of it with us, so make sure you use us as your second screen experience while you're watching the draft, because you're watching the NFL because you're playing fantasy, and you're playing fantasy well because you're paying attention to Fantasy Pros. So, Tags, I know, sometimes when you're running this race, you start sometimes to feel like you're limping to the finish line, but I want to pick you up today because I know you're tired. I want to pick you up and I want to carry you like kind of Byron Leftwich style across this show today because we're going to talk about the comps. So I got you on one side, Yates has got you on the other. Are you ready to go here? Comping some guys, talking about what their potential might be when they get to the NFL, some players that people are familiar with, so they know what to start engaging in their mind in terms of, hey, this guy is going to be like this player was, and maybe even more.
Yeah, we definitely had a show like this a couple months ago where we talked about some of those things, but Yates wasn't on that show. So fortunately today, we're going to let him voice some of his opinions on players, give some player comparisons. I'll chime in on what I think, if I see the same thing that he does. But I'm at the point now where I am so tired of hearing so many rumors. I just want things to happen. I just want concrete things to talk about. It's like hypotheticals on hypotheticals on hypotheticals, and it's like, hey, let's figure out where they go, and then we'll talk about everything. And I promise you guys, we are going to have plenty of coverage leading up to it. But what I want to know from you guys, Yates, do you have a draft day ritual that you do? Mine has always been I go golf. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that with the move and stuff like that, but I usually go golf, play 18 holes of golf on draft day because I want to get away from all of the he said, she said, and whatnot. Like I try and just get away from that stuff. Is there anything that you do?
Yeah, my draft day ritual is watching draft day. That is for everything that you people say about the movie. Like, yeah, it's not realistic. But this is it's become a ritual for the past 3 or 4 years. I will sit down and I will watch draft day. I try to typically step away because on Thursday, right, tomorrow, at this point, all of our work is pretty much done, right? We're going to be doing the major live stream, of course, that Joe mentioned at the top. We'll be doing that, but outside of that, I'm not writing another mock draft. I just published my final mock draft. I'm not doing any other articles. So it's like I just kind of want to distract myself, step away a little bit, but yet still build that excitement, and draft day definitely does that for me.
Yates, are you rumored out too? Have you had it with the rumors and the speculation?
My word. I put out a tweet the other day that said 2 weeks ago, I was like, I feel really good about this NFL draft. I feel really good about my knowledge, where we're at. Now I know nothing, and this is stupid. I'm so tired of this. All my mind is just being twisted around, and I'm so ready for this to not be over, because that's a very cynical way of viewing it.
You're
I'm
ready for it to be
real.
Be here.
Yeah,
exactly. For it to be real. That's it. We're the kings of keeping it real. You can sense the emotion in the guys here, and I think I want to use this emotion. I told you, like I said, we are ready. We're all having our own personal draft nightmares. Tag shared his the other day. I didn't share mine publicly, but I'll share it the other night. I was dreaming that I was all set up for the draft. We were ready to go. The stream was happening, and then there was this blackout thing where I had no recollection of what went on. I came in the next morning, and they're like, hey, so how was the draft? And I said, I think it went well, but I don't remember anything. And they said, yeah, Joe, it's because you fell asleep, and the guys had to do the entire draft without you. You just fell asleep right at the beginning of the coverage. I promise you I'll be awake the entire time. I promise you that's one thing on our draft coverage is not going to happen. So we're having anxious dreams. We can only imagine what everybody out there in the fantasy football community is having. So let's get after it. And a reminder too, if you're not there yet, if you haven't had enough already, well, we've got a 3-round mock you can go back and listen to and watch. We've got a 2-round mock we just did on Monday you can go back and listen to and watch and get yourself prepped, because not everybody is knee-deep in this like we are. So we respect that too. So we got so much content for you. And look, Yates has done such a phenomenal job with Ray breaking down all these guys so many times too, and so deep in so many of the other positions as well on the Dynasty Football Podcast, which you haven't already, please go and subscribe to that as well. Fantastic work there all the way around. Before we jump into the running back comps, I want to remind everybody too, We've still got a day or so left of the Justin Jefferson autographed jersey giveaway, thanks to our friends at pristineauction.com. All you have to do, make a screenshot of a review that you take over an Apple Podcast or on CastBox. You take that, you go over to fantasypros.com/contest, you upload it, you fill out the form, and bang, just like that, you could be entered to win a Justin Jefferson autographed jersey. One of the guys last year we were talking about, and now he is one of the wide receiver ones in the NFL that everybody's just kind of pushing themselves out of the way to get to. So you're listening to the show anyway, you might as well get a little reward. And once you're entered into next month's jersey giveaway as well, or whatever we're giving away. Who knows? We could be giving away autographed hats from the guys, because you see they're always wearing the hats. Maybe they'll autograph a hat, give it to you. Who knows? Everybody wants a Tagliere hat. The Tags hat can go anywhere in your house. You can go in your kitchen, your living room. It's very versatile. We love it. Let's get to the running back comps. Let's start with the guy who's at the top of most boards here, Najee Harris, and let's start with you, Yates. The running back at Alabama, what do you see in terms of a comp that you want to put on him for his potential in the NFL?
Certainly. Well, I want to start off the conversation by saying that comparisons are something that I've been trying to reframe everyone's mind, because it's kind of become a kind of standard to just say this player is really good. Well, that means that he's a generational talent. Jamar Chase, we're going to talk about him here in a little bit. The popular comp for him has been Julio Jones. And it's they're completely different play styles. They're completely different body compositions. So when I talk about comparisons, I am looking back over my combine data that I have since 2000. So I have every running back, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, all their data from combine testing and their pro day numbers. And then, so I'm looking at that, looking at the comparisons, the ones that match up with those, and then also looking at their play style on film to find those comps. So when we're talking about Najee Harris, Ray Garvin actually came up with this comparison a while back, and he says he's a combination of Steven Jackson and Matt Forte. So with Matt Forte, we obviously think about him as, yes, a really good runner in between the tackles, but it was his pass catching prowess that made him so valuable for fantasy football. We obviously know about the 102, 103 reception that he had season back in whatever year that was at this point. So I think that is the type of impact that we can expect from Najee Harris. Not only can he give you a ton of work on the ground because of his size, but yet at the same time, he can give you a ton of work through the air as a receiver out of the backfield, because he has phenomenal hands in his own right. So when I look at Najee Harris, I'm seeing a well-rounded receiver. I'm seeing a punishing runner in between the tackles, Matt Forte.
You know, I think people forget how good Steven Jackson and Forte were. I mean, these guys were both RB1s in fantasy for a while, and they had some fantastic runs. I know your comp tags is a little bit higher potential, and I think where Yates has put them is a great spot for Harris. I think if he becomes that, everybody will be happy with that. But is there an upside for more? Is there an upside comp in your mind for him?
Yeah, I mean, the Forte one's interesting to me. I don't know if that's just based on the combine numbers, because Forte was more to me like a floater. He was like Arian Foster type running back. I got a 3-down back that kind of floated across the way. He didn't have these sharp cuts inside of his Forte, if you will. Whereas Najee Harris is a little bit more violent in his running style. He can be patient like Forte was, but he's got this violence to his game. It's not quite Adrian Peterson type violence, and that's why I think it's like Adrian Peterson, Steven Jackson, somewhere in between those two running backs. And that's a good area to be. I think we can all agree, even if you bring up Matt Forte, I think it's all a great area. And it basically comes down to running backs in the NFL today. You're looking for opportunity. Najee Harris is going to be drafted in the first round, at the very latest top of the second round. He's going to get plenty of opportunity immediately once he walks into the league. I love this guy. And I think that if he goes to the Steelers this year, or if he goes to Steelers at 24, I think we should be drafting him as a borderline RB1 this year, his rookie season. Well,
right now, I'm anticipating that happening, and I know in my rankings over on Fantasy Pros, I kind of have him right in that range already. So we'll see, if that all comes to fruition pretty soon. Now, Travis Etienne, another big-time running back, great career in Clemson. Both of you actually have the same comp. Tags, let's start with you on this one, because both of you guys have Alvin Kamara. What is it that reminds you so much of Kamara that both of you are on the same page, which I just want to say for everybody, that's sometimes rare that you guys both go to the same player in the same comp. So Tags, what did you see that's very Kamara-esque?
I mean, he's a true 3-down back. He plays he played bigger than his listed size, and he was listed right around 200 pounds, and I think people were worried about that coming into everything, and then all of a sudden his pro day came, and he weighs in at like 215, I think it was, so therefore you get closer to Kamara's size too. I know some people have said Jamal Charles, and when Alvin Kamara came out, I compared him to Jamal Charles. I was a big fan of Kamara coming out. I'm a big fan of Etienne because I believe that he's suited for today's NFL.
Right.
He's not the biggest guy, but he's got great contact balance. His burst is off the charts. I mean, when people watched his 40, they were talking about his 40 time and how it was good. And I was like, what I see a guy that legitimately gets up to top speed immediately, and then he kind of tops out, which is still fine. He's got plenty of speed. He's got speed where it matters most. That initial burst is what I love about him. He plays downhill too. He's not a dancer. He doesn't waste time behind the line of scrimmage. He wants to get downhill. And it's just, Clemson's offensive line obviously created some spots for him. Trevor Lawrence having him there helped out. But Travis Etienne, fantastic 3-down back for today's NFL. Not the bruiser that Najee Harris is, but he is a guy that's got, I think one of his best attributes is contact balance and initial burst. So those two things combined with his, ability to catch passes out of the backfield, some team is going to fall in love with this kid.
Now, Yates, do you think the fact that he's not quite a bruiser actually bodes better for his long-term dynasty value?
I mean, you talk about the contact balance, and that's what Kamara brings to the table. That's one of his best traits outside of his receiving ability, is that you cannot bring this guy down on first contact, that he is so difficult. If you do get your hands on him, he's able to shed that contact so easily, and that's what Etienne brings to the table too. Now, with Kamara, I put him here as a comp because I think that this is the type of role that he's going to fill for an NFL offense. Not necessarily that I think that he compares completely to Kamara and the refined NFL running back that we have in today's game, right, with Kamara and the New Orleans Saints. But from a running style, I think it is more Matt Breida. When I look at Travis Etienne, I think that he runs very similarly to Matt Breida. But when you look at the type of role that he is going to fill in the NFL as a receiver, with his contact balance, with his breakaway speed, I think that Alvin Kamara makes complete sense.
All right, let's talk about Javonte Williams, because you've got a very strong comp, especially in terms of those combine numbers that you say are kind of eerily similar to the guy that you've comped Javonte Williams to, Yates.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with David Montgomery here for Javonte Williams. When you think about Montgomery, say what you will about his top-end speed, and, Javonte Williams doesn't exactly have the best top-end speed either, running a 4.55 at his pro day, but it is his burst, and it's his contact balance. Say what you will about David Montgomery, his ability to keep fighting through contact is one of his best traits, and it's one of the best in the NFL. When you look at his ability to pick up that additional yardage, right? He gets hit, and he's picking up the additional 2 yards because he is able to put his hand on the ground and stay with his center of gravity, continued moving forward. So Javonte Williams definitely brings that. He brings that power. He brings that vision to the table. And I think that from a comparison standpoint, these guys make a ton of sense being looked at kind of the same way.
All right, you've kind of got another running back here who's been pretty good in the NFL the last few years. He's actually just signed extension with his team after free agency, and that's Chris Carson. So what is it you see in Williams that reminds you of Carson, Tex?
Yeah, I don't mind the David Montgomery comp. I think Javonte Williams is a little more decisive in the way he runs, and that's why I went with Carson ultimately over David Montgomery. But it's the idea that he's a bruiser. He could bang. He does have good contact balance. He does lower that pad level once he gets in between the tackles. I think David Montgomery is like a guy that he fights like a guy his size, but he tries to move like a guy like LaShawn McCoy, where it's like he's trying to be Saquon Barkley, but he doesn't have that flexibility that, it's just something about Saquon Barkley that makes him special. David Montgomery tries to be that back, whereas Javonte Williams is someone that reminds me of Chris Carson because he's a guy that's going to get every single yard you block for him. He's going to break some tackles along the way. He was mixed in a timeshare a little bit. He did deal with some injuries, so it's like, there was 1 year of production, so I think someone like Chris Carson makes a whole lot of sense because he is a banger. He can be used in the passing game a little bit, but ideally you're going to have him mixed in with some sort of pass catching back like he did at North Carolina with Michael Carter.
All right, well, speaking of Michael Carter and staying in North Carolina, let's talk about some of his comps tags because, once again, NFL's a different game. You're using different running backs now. Where does Carter fit in your mind in terms of an NFL comp?
I loved this one when I came up with it, and it was Justin Forsett. Some people that are new to fantasy may not know Justin Forsett, but he was a guy that kind of bounced from team to team, finding his way because there's always a place for a guy like that in today's NFL. He goes around, he does everything well. He's not extremely blessed from an athleticism standpoint, but he does everything well. He works hard. He will pass block. So someone is going to love this guy, and he's always going to have a job. He's going to stick around for a long time. If you're looking for like a flex player in Dynasty, I think he's one of those players that could stick around. And then if he does get the opportunity, like Justin Forsett did finally with the Ravens, and it's like a little bit with the Seahawks too, where it's like, wow, this guy can carry more than I think anybody thought he could, despite the smaller stature. So Justin Forsett, I was pretty proud of that comp. I do like Michael Carter so much as a player, but the reason we don't have him higher in the rankings is because obviously the guys ahead of him are guys that I think can handle 20 touches per game, whereas Michael Carter, I don't really know with his smaller size if he can.
And Forsett's a guy that in the past, like you said, with Seattle and Baltimore, had some moments in some games too. And your comp is another guy, Yates, that's had some moments even last season where some huge moments in a couple games there for the Indianapolis Colts, and it's Nyheim Hines.
Yeah, when you look at Hines and Carter, it really matches up well with their skill sets and what they bring to the table. Hines is a great receiver out of the backfield. Carter is a great receiver out of the backfield. Hines wins more with burst and agility. Carter's burst and agility scores are just off the charts. So I think with Carter, it's going to depend on the offense that he lands in, because people are going to hear the Nyheim Hines comp and they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to draft Nyheim Hines. No, it's just saying that this is how he wins in the NFL. The offense that he lands in and the potential role that he's going to fill is going to dictate his fantasy value, especially once we get out of this top 3 tier. Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell, Trey Sermon, the guys that we're going to keep talking about here, they're all landing spot dependent for their fantasy value. So just purely from a comparison standpoint, Nyheim Hines, when you watch the two of them when you watch them side by side, it's hard not to look at that comparison.
Now, speaking of where he ends up influencing the value, I think Kenneth Gainwell of Memphis is certainly one of those guys. I think if he lands in the right spot, he becomes immediately fantasy worthy, depending on what that spot is. So, Yates, you've got a comp here where I really like, because this is another player that had a lot of good moments last year, and you could see, once again, the evolution of the NFL, more of these pass-catching running backs, guys who get out there in space. J.D. McKissic is a player that I know I had a lot of shares of last year, that I used in flex spots and rotation spots and played a lot in DFS because, hell, the touches were there.
Absolutely. And this is more so not necessarily from what we see with the combine numbers, but this is just purely from me watching so much tape, is that when I watch Kenneth Gainwell, it's hard for me not to see J.D. McKissic. They move very, very similarly on the football field, very similar sizes. Gainwell has, I think, better receiving ability than what J.D. McKissic brings to the table, and McKissic is a great receiver in his own right. So Gainwell is a fantastic receiver. He received the highest grade for me as a receiver in this running back class. And then also, I think Gainwell has a little bit more top-end speed. So an NFL team is going to be able to move Gainwell all around the field, all around the formation, which they did a little bit in Washington this past year. But I think Gainwell is just going to be kind of a supercharged J.D. McKissic.
No, fair enough. Now, Tags, who are you putting on to this comp for Gainwell?
I love that you brought up J.D. McKissic. And I the reason I love it is because you look at what J.D. McKissic was before he went to Washington.
Right.
And he was nothing. He was left for dead in the NFL as a guy that was just a depth chart piece. You can mix him in. He's going to get a couple targets a game, and that's it. And then all of a sudden he goes to Washington and he becomes a fantasy player. This is what it comes down to. This is why I harp on so much. It's like landing spot is going to matter so much for these guys. And someone like Gainwell is very dependent on where he lands and where he goes. I think there's comps that I can make. The low-end comp I have for Kenneth Gainwell is Theo Riddick. Theo Riddick, phenomenal pass catcher out of the backfield. Didn't get very many carries. When he did get carries, he averaged probably somewhere around 5 yards per carry, but he was never used in that fashion. A middle comparison, maybe high-end, C.J. Spiller. I think about C.J. Spiller and the fact that, he was a guy in Buffalo alongside Fred Jackson. Very, very, very good. Durability concerns when he started getting up there in the touch totals, but he was very agile in a way that kind of like a Reggie Bush type player. And Kenneth Gainwell, I do believe, can carry the ball more than some people think. I would be curious because I think he weighed in at 201 on his pro day, so he's just over that 200-pound threshold. If he can get 12 carries per game, this kid's going to be a fantasy star, because he is, no matter where he goes. You do not draft Kenneth Gainwell and say, we're not going to use him in the passing game. That's his number one strength. He can do some work in the, if you want to put him in a spread offense, he's going to be facing 6-7 man fronts. He will get work done there as well. I think Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona would be the coach to understand how to utilize his strengths. So I would be I'm really curious to see where he goes, because I think, 4 years from now, we could be talking about Kenneth Gainwell, the fantasy star, like that, the RB2, RB3 type player, or we could be talking about Kenneth Gainwell, the guy that we knew he can catch some passes, but
hey, remember that guy, right?
Yeah.
Remember that guy who had a lot of potential but didn't land in the right spot, and that's the NFL. After all, unfortunately, that's and we've done a mock at least one, maybe even two tags where that scenario did come to fruition. And I remember you talking about it, me saying the same thing, which is, hey, this is a great place if this does happen. I hope we can kind of will that from a fantasy perspective to happen, because I'd love to see that. We've got some more running backs to talk about, but first I want to take a moment to mention a sponsor of today's show, which is Magic Spoon, because look, growing up, cereal is one of the best parts of being a kid, right? But you have to give it up because it's not really good for you. All the, the corn syrup, this, and all of the sugar and all those things. Well, guess what? Magic Spoon doesn't have any of that. It's got 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein in it. It's only 4 net carbs in each serving, and it's only 140 calories. So it's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free, but it's not taste-free, okay? It tastes good, and it's good for you, and it's convenient. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. So we've got exciting news, because Magic Spoon has released a super delicious new flavor, birthday cake. So every morning, it's basically your birthday. That's right. Magic Spoon will be available in a 5-pack. It's limited time only for the birthday cake one. So get it while you can, or you can build your own box of available flavors to build your own custom bundle from cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cinnamon. Sometimes Yates just puts them all in one bowl and eats them together. I think it's gross, but whatever. That's his own ritual. He's his own guy. Go to Magic Spoon right now. MagicSpoon.com/FantasyPros. Grab the new limited edition birthday cake for a custom bundle of cereal to try today, and be sure to use our promo code FantasyPros. Again, that's one word, FantasyPros, at checkout, and save $5 off your order. This offer is now good anywhere in the United States or Canada, but only when you use our code FantasyPros at checkout. So once again, go to MagicSpoon.com/FantasyPros, use that code FantasyPros, save $5 off, and get your breakfast right. Thank you for Magic Spoon for being a sponsor of today's show. So let's keep kicking it with the running backs here for a moment, and let's go to Trey Sermon, who is out of Ohio State. And Yates, I think this one's kind of all over the board. You hear a lot of different people say a lot of different things about Sermon. So what is it you see? Because I know you've watched all the tape. What do you see? What do you want to put a comp on him to make everybody else understand what it is that you're seeing?
Absolutely. There are some people that are absolutely in love with Trey Sermon and his projection to the NFL. They think he can get round 2 draft capital in the 2021 NFL draft, and I just don't see that. I've scouted Sermon for the past couple years, obviously with his time at Oklahoma and then coming over to Ohio State, and there just really isn't that one elite trait that we can look at and kind of hang our hat on. Now, I will say this. If he lands in the right spot, can he be fantasy relevant? Absolutely. If he gets the workload, absolutely. He's a well-rounded back enough where he can succeed. But I'm not willing to bet on him turning out to be a top-tier contributor in the NFL, because there isn't that one elite trait that I can look back on and say, like, this is how he's going to win. And again, this is because I've watched so many games of Trey Sermon over the past couple of years, dating back to his time at Oklahoma. So with a comp, when I was going through, and again, I mentioned at the top, like my combine data, there's one that lines up, and it's kind of eerie how much it lines up, and that's Rico Dowdle, who came out of South Carolina last year. Now, if the casual fantasy player isn't going to know the name Rico Dowdle because he went undrafted. They are both 6 foot, 215 pounds. Rico Dowdle ran a 4.54. Trey Sermon ran a 4.57. Sermon had a 37-inch vertical jump. Dowdle had a 38-inch. Broad jump for Sermon was 125 inches, 127 inches for Rico Dowdle. So the numbers really match up here almost identically, and Dowdle went undrafted. So I just don't see maybe the school pedigree for Sermon and how he showed up in that big college football playoff game, maybe that's how he gets drafted in the top 3 rounds. But even looking at Tags' comp here, I think we can both agree that in our opinion, I think Sermon is just kind of a guy.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tags' comp is Chris Ivory, who, at certain times served as a running back that you could go to in a pinch, and had one glorious game I remember in London not that long ago. But Chris Ivory was, I think, not the guy you wanted to be the starting running back, but if you had to go to him for a game or two, he could do the job. And that kind of feels like what Sermon could be, Tags.
Yeah, I'm with Yates in the fact that I don't think Sermon's going to get drafted in round 2. Okay. Can I see a team taking a shot in the 3rd round? Potentially. But when you go from the 1st to the 2nd and 3rd, it's like all of a sudden this opportunity, the chances are going to drop. I think Sermon's ultimately a depth chart guy that can step into a starter role if needed. And that's why I said Ivory. But And Ivory did have some moments, but Ivory, it was almost a different league back then. And I think Chris Ivory, I don't know if Chris Ivory would survive in today's NFL. You know what I mean? Like, the game has started to change where you're looking for a more versatile running back. And that's my concern about Sermon. So I think Yates is onto something there in the fact that, you know, is there an elite trait to his game? No. I think it depends on when you watch Trey Sermon and when you would like him. Because I remember I started watching some of his games earlier in the 2020 season, and I was kind of like, I don't really get it. And then you get further and further into the season, and it's like the guy got stronger as it went on. And there are some running backs who have conditioning, and they just do better as the season goes on, as defenses wear down. So Trey Sermon, he's going to get drafted. The question is, how high do NFL teams view him? But in today's NFL, I do think he's going to fall into day 3.
Now, some of the comps you guys have thrown on this next running back I think are fascinating. It's Oklahoma's Rhamondre Stevenson. And Tags, we'll start with you on this one because your comp is a player who's been around the league, multiple teams for a very long time. And if that ends up being his NFL career, I think you would take that if you're Stevenson.
Yeah, I'm not a Stevenson guy. I mean, I know
I couldn't tell by your reaction or your comp, but I mean, well, but look, the guy you put is Peyton Barber, who's been an NFL back for a while now. Somehow he's like, I don't know what he is for whatever reason. So I mean, look, he's good on him in terms of fantasy. I don't know if it's any good, but what is it you don't like about Stevenson?
I just don't. This all comes back to the idea he's a worse version of Trey Sermon, in my opinion, in terms of like what does he bring to an NFL offense? Like, he was an oversized back that was massive. That you were like, all right, he's going to run between the tackles. He's going to be that guy. But in today's NFL, what is that guy? You know what I mean? Adrian Peterson breeds are dying in today's NFL. These players don't get second contracts in the NFL. They wear down relatively quickly, unless you're Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry is just a special specimen. Stevenson is not that. So Peyton Barber, basically, in terms of like, will the guy get drafted? Probably. Will he wind up on a depth chart somewhere? Probably. Will he ever make a fantasy impact? No.
All right, fair enough. Now, your comp is a little bit higher here, Yates. You got Jordan Howard over here for Stevenson. So talk me through that.
Yeah, when you look at Stevenson and Jordan Howard, the size measurables line up perfectly. Again, going to my combine data, and Peyton Barber is actually on this list too, Tags. So as far as their size, sitting at 230 pounds, with Howard and Stevenson both great footwork at the line of scrimmage, and then also they're very economic in space. They're intelligent runners where they're not going to make players miss in the same way that a Travis Etienne or Javonte Williams or Michael Carter, like they're not going to make them miss in that way, but they're very subtle and slight with their movements to be able to create that space. So Stevenson is just a smart runner. Does he have that elite burst and that elite agility? No, absolutely not. But at that size, I think that if he gets the opportunity, he can be fantasy relevant, just like Jordan Howard. Now, Jordan Howard is the depth piece on the Philadelphia Eagles depth chart. He's not fantasy relevant whatsoever anymore, but he was very fantasy relevant for a couple of years there. So Rhamondre Stevenson, if he gets the opportunity, yes, I think he can be a contributor. But once we get past the top 5, Ray and I have been talking about this nonstop on our podcast. Once we get past the top 5 running backs in this class, they're all landing spot dependent, and none of them are really, really good. It's a very top heavy class. So Stevenson, I like him for who he is, but I'm not going to sit here and just say like, yeah, he's a top 5 back in this class for me. And like, I think that I'm willing to push all my chips in on Rhamondre Stevenson.
Well, if that's the case, then what are your feelings on Mississippi State's Kylin Hill? Because one of the comps that you put on him is actually a player that I love coming into 2021, and that's Cam Akers.
When you look at Cam Akers and the testing numbers with Kylin Hill, they match up almost identically. Where Hill and Akers, in my opinion, too, coming out last year, I wasn't as high on Akers. I think I had him at RB5 in this class, in the 2020 class, was because he was more of an athlete than a refined running back prospect, in my opinion. Kylin Hill is that same way, where you look at his receiving ability, that's what is going to cause him to stick and get an opportunity in the NFL. It's the same thing with Akers, where I looked at Akers' receiving ability and said that's how he's going to succeed on an NFL roster until he can figure everything else out. Now, Akers figured it out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Hill, I think, is going to take a little bit longer for him to transition to a full-time workhorse running back, if he ever does. But he does have the receiving ability, the juice, the burst, and the acceleration and athleticism that I think that he can be very fantasy relevant if he lands in the right offense.
Now, Tags, your comp on Hill is another running back, too, that's had some moments in the NFL, but once again, system dependent seems to be the running theme here when it comes to running backs. So what's your comp on Hill?
Yeah, no, I actually dig that. Like, the more Yates was talking through it, I'm kind of like, yes, I like my comp even more, and it's Damian Williams. Damian Williams, every single time that I look at his listed weight, I'm like, no way. He's not that big. He's not over 220 pounds. And then you're like, well, I guess he is. Kylin Hill's the same way. Like when I watch him play, he doesn't look like a 220-pound running back, but he's right up there. So like he is a guy that can play all three downs. And again, Damian Williams, when he first came out, he was considered a third down back with Miami. That's basically the way he was used. And eventually he worked his way into a bigger role because of injuries. I think Kylin Hill could have a similar path to touches. So I feel really good about this one. He's one of those guys, again, these are the running backs that we're talking about. These are deep. And running back, it all comes down to opportunity. You're drafting for opportunity. And if there is no opportunity, if he's drafted to a depth chart where they have three running backs ahead of him, it's like you're not likely to get a whole lot out of him. But if he lands in a depth chart behind someone like, say, Christian McCaffrey, where there is absolutely no depth behind him, all of a sudden he's an interesting guy to stash in dynasty rosters.
All right, one more running back before we move on to wide receivers is Chuba Hubbard of Oklahoma State. Tags, we'll start with you in this one because this guy got a lot of publicity for the last few years, but in terms of your NFL expectations, where does it land?
I'm going Tevin Coleman here. Someone that fits a zone scheme, someone that runs a little too upright, someone that is not destined for a workhorse role. I know that there's some people that are, Chuba Hubbard truthers out there that they watched his 2019 film and then refused to watch. I'm not saying he wasn't better in 2019. He was, but his pad level is always way too high. He just basically, when he goes into traffic, he dips his shoulders in his head. He doesn't lower his center of gravity. He doesn't bring his hips down. He's just someone that you want to bring out, one cut runner, try and get him upfield. So that's why I think of Tevin Coleman. I'm not really a big Tevin Coleman fan either. He's had some moments in the NFL if he falls into the right scheme and if he's played in the right role, because I don't think Hubbard should be a 3-down running back in the NFL. I believe he should be a timeshare running back. So if he were to go to a team like the Jets that have this Kyle Shanahan offense supposed to be coming over, we'll see if it works like that. But that's I think the ideal landing spot. Tevin Coleman. That's the reason the Jets signed Tevin Coleman.
Oh, speaking of Shanahan systems, it appears that Yates has a similar kind of thought process here when it comes to Hubbard, because you've got Mostert, another 49er running back in this same comp.
Yeah, everything that Tag said can just be copied over, because you look at with Hubbard and his projection, you do want him in an outside zone scheme where he's able to just plant his foot and get upfield and utilize his speed. He's got Olympic sprinter speed. Now, was he injured and there was a nagging injury in 2020? I think so, based on all that we're hearing. So I think that could have limited him. Maybe you get him into an NFL offense and he turns out to be something more. But even his 2019 tape wasn't exactly like a refined NFL running back prospect. He was just winning with pure speed. So I think that if you land him in the right system, he absolutely can be effective. But I actually would not be shocked if Hubbard doesn't get drafted until after round 5 in this 2021 NFL draft. And at that point, it's the path for him to be fantasy relevant is very, very difficult.
All right, so those are the comps on the running back side of things from the guys. Let's see what they think of some of these wide receivers, and we'll start with the top of the board, which obviously is Ja'Marr Chase. And I got to tell you, Yates, I was a little sad here. I thought this was kind of a bummer. Like, I was looking for this, okay, Ja'Marr Chase is going to be this dude. Everyone's talking about Ja'Marr Chase, and my goodness, he's so good on the field. My goodness, what a matchup disaster, all this stuff. And then you gave me the comp of Marvin Jones, and I'm not trying to knock Marvin Jones, a good wide receiver in the NFL, but is this the floor you're giving me? Because I hope it's not the ceiling of Ja'Marr Chase, because he's going to go in the top 5 picks.
Absolutely. And again, this is more so looking at the measurables and the testing numbers, and it's up to the prospects to determine who they turn into. So when you look at the testing numbers and the measurables and just watching them on film, Marvin Jones jumps out to me time after time. I've been banging this drum for a while now. I've put out several clips kind of highlighting the differences and similarities actually between Marvin Jones and Ja'Marr Chase. They both win excellent contested catchability, able to track the ball well deep downfield, refined route runners in their own right. And Ja'Marr Chase certainly has a little bit more juice, a little bit more athleticism to his game than Marvin Jones. But Jones has been really underrated for the majority of his career. Now, people are going to say, like, how can you compare a top 5 pick to a 5th round pick? This is looking at who they are in the NFL now and trying to find, again, just kind of giving people the frame of mind to say, this is how they're going to win. And I think that Ja'Marr Chase and Marvin Jones are going to win in very similar ways. I just think Chase can do it to a better level.
Look, it's good to have some sobering reality. And you're right, Jones is very underrated. I'm glad you gave us the sober reality here, a little bit of Ja'Marr Chase, because I think it's something everybody needs to hear. Now that we've heard it, Tags, take me out to the club because I want to go get hammered and talk about how great Ja'Marr Chase is going to be and what the upside is. Let's go do it.
I don't have an issue with Yates' comp. I really don't. I mean,
I don't have an issue with it either. I just, like I said, it was not what I was anticipating, but it's healthy for me. It's like the magic spoon. It's good for me. I should be eating it. And I should be very happy. And Marvin Jones, and I'm sure then I can't wait to hear more about Marvin Jones with Jacksonville this year, because Yates brings up a lot of good points there. So when we get into redraft talk, that's going to be fun. But go ahead, take me through a little bit more, I don't know, more, stars in the sky kind of a feel.
Well, it's just good to keep us in check, right?
Sure,
in terms of comparisons and like giving different ranges of outcomes, because I think the ranges are fantastic, because I don't think that Jamar Chase is going to bust in the NFL. I don't think anybody has that concern. I think you could say low end is Marvin Jones, but Marvin Jones is underrated. If you look at
absolutely,
so NFL wide receivers, if you don't ever get the opportunity to shine, you're never going to shine. Okay, Marvin Jones, he's never had more than 115 targets in a season. There's been just 4 times in his career where he has had more than 92 targets in a season. However, in 7 of 9 years, he's averaged at least 8.2 yards per target. That's a good number. That's a really good number. Marvin Jones is a good NFL wide receiver. It's not a dig at Jamar Chase by saying Marvin Jones is a comparison, but it's just more about Jamar Chase is going to get more opportunity than Marvin Jones ever got in year 1. Like, that's what's going to happen. So he's going to get that opportunity that Marvin Jones really never got. So you might just realize Jamar Chase is really good at football. Opportunity is everything. We follow those targets, because one of those players that does get the targets, that is great in contested catch situations, that may not be a Calvin Ridley type route runner or anything like that, but is very, very good and a reliable target, is DeAndre Hopkins. And that's my comparison. So I think it's Marvin Jones, DeAndre Hopkins. These are 2 players that it's 2 ends of the spectrum, but I think that you're going to get closer to Hopkins because you're going to get those target numbers. Whereas if Marvin Jones got DeAndre Hopkins type targets, I think he would put up not as good of numbers, but close to. I think he is that good. So I dig the comp. I just think it's a different range of outcomes, because we have to project how many targets this player is going to get. And I think Jamar Chase falls into that DeAndre Hopkins territory.
All right, fair enough. Let's do a couple Alabama guys here back to back. We'll start with Jaylen Waddle. And Tags, you've got a slash here, which is 2 players who, again, fantasy goodness here with both these guys. Tyreek Hill / Steve Smith, but very different body types, I feel like, too.
They're completely different body types. Right. But the thing is, I felt the need to capitalize the fact that Jaylen Waddle plays bigger than what he is.
Okay.
Tyreek Hill plays bigger than what he is. Steve Smith plays bigger than what he was, where he was a guy that he had that dog in him, that
absolutely.
Guy, like you throw the ball up and that dude will fight for you. Jaylen Waddle is that guy. He's a warrior. He played through injuries. He's not Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill, I don't even know how to put it. The dude has blazing speed, obviously, but he also cuts on a dime. It's sharp as hell, and he stays so low to the ground when he does it. And it's like he's just untouchable in a way, where it's like, I don't want to compare anybody to Tyreek Hill, but Jaylen Waddle is somewhere of a mix between these 2 players, where he does have that speed. He can make cuts while moving full speed, and that's what's going to get him open down the field. And once he refines some of his route running, maybe he can eventually become a Tyreek Hill type player. I still think there's some work to be done in his routes that are going to make him that elite wide receiver. But Jaylen Waddle is going to be a baller in this league. I have no doubt about that. I just hope, for the love of all that is good, that he does not end up with either the Lions and Jared Goff or the Giants and Daniel Jones. If he goes to one of those 2 teams, unfortunately, his potential will not be unlocked until they move on from their quarterbacks.
Well, after all of that setup, this is one of the great comic moments ever. I don't have to do any work. All that talk about Tyreek Hill. Yates, who's your comp here for Jaylen Waddle?
It's this guy named Tyreek Hill. We anytime you hear it in NFL draft circles, anytime that there is a fast receiver, he just gets comped to Tyreek Hill. And I really hate that. Yeah. But if there ever was a player who compares to Tyreek Hill, and from, Tags, you mentioned his ability to stop on a dime, Jaylen Waddle does have that. He has that ability to cut and accelerate, and he moves. I've called him the Flash on the football field. He moves at just a different speed than everyone else on the field. So Hill also has an ability to go up and high point the football. Like, he has an insane vertical jump. There's a play that I can't remember the game, but it's a post route deep downfield, and you just see Hill go up and leap over the defender. I can't even remember the game, but it's just like ingrained in my mind. Yeah. And there's a play like that Waddle has against Missouri. So you can see that same ability to go up and make contested catches, which and play much, much bigger than his frame would dictate. So Waddle for Tyreek Hill, again, he's going to be, like you said, Tex, his landing spot is crucial for his fantasy ceiling, but I think that he's going to be really, really good no matter what offense he lands in.
All right, now we've got another Alabama wide receiver here, Devonta Smith, and you've got a slash on this one, but I actually think it's great because you guys are agreement sort of kind of on this next one, slashes aside, which is Marvin Harrison, which I think this is excellent. And I think that Smith in particular has not gotten enough credit for what he did last year. I think so many people are hung up on the size and the weight and all the other things. But let's go and look at what he did on the field. It's not like he wasn't playing against other SEC teams and other big talent, and he was still just all world. So I think it's time, with enough time has passed anyway, where we're buying back into, oh yeah, you know what? Smith is pretty good. And I absolutely love this comp, Yates, that you got here of Harrison. So talk me through that. And I know you got like a range, so you could talk us through that too.
Absolutely. Well, Marvin Harrison is the main comparison there that you hear just across NFL draft circles. So that's kind of me bringing that in. But then also I want to kind of lean back into my combine data. I'm going to talk about that and how I compare players. And Paul Richardson is the other one that comes to mind here. We talk about Paul Richardson from his time with Seattle a couple years ago, and he played at 175 pounds. Marquise Brown, you could obviously make that same comparison. Devonta Smith, when I go back and I input Devonta Smith's name here into my database, no comparisons come up whatsoever from the year 2000 on, because there has not been a wide receiver who's been around 166 pounds. It has been in that range, and that's what Smith's going to play at. But here's the thing. I don't care. Like, his ability to play much, much bigger than his frame with his wingspan is the same as, it's larger than Antonio Gandy Golden, who came out last year out of Liberty, who was 6'4", 220. And it's the same width as Colin Johnson, who is 6'6", 220, that came out of Texas last year. So when you're looking at Devonta Smith, yes, he's only 166 pounds. He's only 6'1", but he has a wingspan that allows him to go up and high point the football like he is playing at 6'4". So Devonta Smith, great route runner, great speed on the football field. I think that Marvin Harrison is a fair comparison, but then he also just it's all going to come down to an NFL team betting on that outlier and where you take him in the NFL draft. For us, that really doesn't matter, because for fantasy purposes, we're just saying he's going to be really good no matter what offense he lands in. Now it's just going to come down to an NFL team having to make that decision of how early do you take this potential outlier.
And tags for you also, Marvin Harrison is on your list of comps. So walk me through your thoughts on Harrison and Smith.
I'm going to have a shirt whenever they come out with it, with this dude's nickname on it, Slim Reaper.
Oh, it's a great nickname. It's a fantastic nickname.
Like that's just, that is one of the coolest nicknames I've ever heard, and it's fitting. I mean, the dude, he is smaller, and typically I will lower players down my board most of the time if I see that they're smaller, like Tutu Atwell. Like, that dude is just too small, and he's not elite in my opinion in terms of what I've watched. But Devonta Smith, you watch, and the dude is just a straight up baller. He makes the game comes easy to him. He makes it look easy. He does things that other wide receivers just don't do. And you don't put up the season that he did with the talent that he had around him if you are not a dominant football player. He's a dominant football player. I've said before, and I'll say it again, the NFL team that drafts him will never get ridiculed for this draft pick. They'll never say, oh, Devonta Smith, he was just too small and he busted because he was too small. He's not going to bust because he's too small. The only reason that he could ever bust in the NFL, in my opinion, is because he was hurt. And is that possible with a 166-pound frame? Potentially, yeah. And I'm of the mindset that he was at Alabama. They have strength and conditioning coaches that probably tried to put some weight on his frame. Now, he is going to get older. He's still young. So he's going to get bigger naturally, I think. But again, I bet on football players. This brings me back to the whole idea of Calvin Ridley when people were talking about him being too small. Devonta Smith he's just a football player, man. And the player I said it about last year, I wasn't particularly like over the top high on T. Higgins last year. I liked him, but my number one trait for him was, I said, the game comes naturally to him. Like, that's the best thing I could say about him. And it's the same thing for Devonta Smith. And I think it's crazy for people to think that he's going to fall outside the top 12, to be fair. And I'm saying that because we watched Kevin White get drafted in the top 5, or in the top 10. We watched John Ross get drafted in the top 10. And you mean to tell me this kid that just put together that season, that legitimately, I think he had more like 3 touchdown games than he had 0 touchdown games in 2020. Like, the dude is just, stop trying to doubt him. Slim Reaper. Let's go.
I'm with you. I'm fired up about it. I gotta tell you too, man. Give me the football player. I mean, the measurables are good and all that stuff is fun. It's important. Give me the football player. Always look at the tape. Always see what the guy does in the game action. All right, before we go on to more wide receivers here, I want to also welcome a new sponsor to our fantasy football podcast, and it's IP Vanish. So what is IP Vanish? Well, It's a virtual private network, a VPN for short, and it's a VPN of super important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computers, tablets, phones, even things like your Fire Stick when you're streaming media. And when you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, whatever it is you're doing. So when Tags is going down his rabbit hole of stats, he can do it by himself without anybody paying attention to it. That's important because what you're doing on the internet is no one's business but yours, and IPVanish helps you remain anonymous and secure on the internet. For listeners of the show, IPVanish is offering an incredible 65% off. That's just $349 for the first month and $31.49 for the year. So here's everything you get with IPVanish. You get anonymous IP addresses. This means your personal IP address can't be tracked by anyone on the web. Circumvent any online censorship. IPVanish has more than 1,500 servers in 70 plus locations. Get protection when in public Wi-Fi. Remember, IPVanish, all your data is encrypted, so no one can snoop on what you're doing. And 24/7 tech support, email, call them, chat with them. They're there to help. So if you go to ipvanish.com/pros, you claim your 65% savings. They have plans starting at $3.49 or $31.49 for the entire year. This is the time to sign up with our discount and the current promotional offerings you can get at a VPN for 65% off their usual offering. IPVanish is the best, even rated 4.7 out of 5 over there on the internet in terms of 6,000 reviews already. So once again, go to ipvanish.com/pros and claim your savings today. Let's claim some wide receiver comps, and let's go to Rondale Moore of Purdue. Yates, you've got some fun ones on here, and I like these, so let's start with you. Your comp for the NFL for Rondale Moore from Purdue.
Absolutely. When we look at Rondale Moore, I've said that he is Curtis Samuel playing in Tyler Lockett's body. Tyler Lockett, from a
I love that movie. That's one of my favorite comedies.
From a measurable standpoint, they stand very, very similarly. But then Curtis Samuel, I think, is the role that Rondale Moore is going to fill, where Samuel being utilized at every level of the field, but then also giving some carries out of the backfield and everything like that. So I think that Rondale Moore plays in Tyler Lockett's body, but yet is going to occupy the role of a Curtis Samuel for fantasy purposes.
All right, you got a Rondale Moore out-of-body experience for us, Dags?
No, I don't. I went with Golden Tate here. Is a smaller player that's built to absorb some hits over the middle of the field. Golden Tate, if you go back to the beginning of his career, he was someone that could stretch the field. He had some speed to do that at Notre Dame, and then he came into the NFL, and Seattle tried using him in that kind of role, and eventually they transitioned to putting him in the slot and finding different ways to use him. People, the player is tarnished in people's minds right now because they'll hear Golden Tate and they'll be like, hey. Golden Tate was a very good player for a very long time. Absolutely. And I think Rondale Moore could be that same player. It's just understanding how to utilize his strengths. I think he's best used as a slot receiver that could absorb those hits over the middle of the field. You could use him on handoffs to the back of the field. You get creative with him, basically. So I like that you brought up Curtis Samuel because my ideal landing spot for him is the Panthers. I think going there and putting him in somewhat of a Curtis Samuel role would benefit him very well.
That would be a great spot. Look, any of these comps is good. That means some solid fantasy productions coming out of Moore. What's coming out of Rashod Bateman of Minnesota? I know both of you guys are on the same path here. And Tags, the last time we did this, you said Keenan Allen. I thought that was perfect. Yates seems to agree with you. So what is it you see that reminds you of Allen?
Solid football player, very solid football player. I mean, obviously the height that he came in was almost 2 inches shorter. It was 20 pounds less than what was expected out of him, which kind of sucks. But at the same time, you have to trust what's on the film. And you watch Rashod Bateman, excellent route runner, can play both on the perimeter and in the slot. He's versatile in that aspect. He's one of the most intelligent route runners in terms of what he can do. Justin Jefferson was that way last year. I know Yates and I talked about Jefferson, that we loved him coming out, and he just understands how a cornerback plays. He understands how to manipulate that cornerback. He's not going to be a very, I don't want to say he's a contested catch guy. I don't think Keenan Allen's that guy either, where they just generate separation. And that's basically what you're drafting them for, to play. And a team that drafts him, I hope they don't pigeonhole him onto the perimeter alone, because I think that he would play an awesome big slot role. And that's why I think the Bears at 20 are a team to watch, with them trying to trade away Anthony Miller, potentially, Allen Robinson on that franchise tag. I just look for opportunities like that for someone like Rashod Bateman, because I think that he can shine in the NFL, a la Keenan Allen.
It's funny you mentioned the route running, because that's something last year in the Black Book with Jefferson we talked about quite a bit. And it's one of those things that I think, when you get to the NFL level, if you could do that successfully, you almost control your own destiny to a certain extent. And it's something that I don't think really gets enough attention. It gets not enough sometimes, because everyone's worrying about the speed and this and that. And for you, Yates, you also see Allen's for all the same reasons as Tags, or some other things too that maybe he didn't mention?
Tags was out in front on this comparison, and he's absolutely right. When you look at Bateman, and now Allen doesn't have really, I mean, Allen's route running now is his elite trait that he can sit back on and hang his hat on. And Bateman can certainly get to that point because he is well-rounded already. And we know that, players' development doesn't stop as soon as they enter the NFL. So I think that Bateman can continue to grow to where the point where he gets to his route running being his best trait that he can hang his hat on. So yeah, I love the comp here for Bateman, and Keenan Allen makes a ton of sense.
Now you both have the same guy for Kadarius Toney as well. So Kadarius Toney from Florida, you've both got Mecole Hardman there. Yates, we haven't quite seen the high level yet for Mecole Hardman. We've seen some moments which are very exciting. We don't know, maybe that'll continue to develop here in year 3, I believe it is for now, Hardman. So what is it you see in Toney that reminds you so much?
They're very, very similar sizes and measurables, testing numbers here. So really, when you look at their role that they're probably going to fill in the NFL, from the the athletic traits and everything like that, it all just matches up here for Hardman. So I think that Toney might take a little bit to develop to become a refined route runner, to become a refined NFL wide receiver, just like it is with Hardman. But the traits and athleticism is all there to become that.
Do you think, Tags, that Hardman hasn't gotten there yet just because, well, he's got guys like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and just doesn't get the amount of opportunities to develop on the field?
I've gotten to the point where I'm worried about Hardman because he's had opportunities in terms of the injuries in front of him and the players they put on the field. And Andy Reid always finds ways to utilize his best options. You know what I mean? So the fact that he hasn't got that opportunity yet, I'm a little bit worried. And there's a lot of people out there that are still Mecole Hardman truthers. And I'm not going to say that he's been very efficient on a per touch basis. When he gets opportunities, he performed. But there's something behind the scenes because they talked about involving him more as a wide receiver this year, and that didn't really happen. He's playing basically half the snaps. So Kadarius Toney, he's got some fans out there. There's some people that are very high on him. And I think it's going to be the same situation where if he doesn't get on the field right away, people are going to say, oh, it's just because he hasn't gotten his opportunity. Just keep waiting on it. If he doesn't get opportunity right out of the gate, I'm going to be officially worried.
All right, let's talk about 2 more wide receivers. We'll do Elijah Moore here of Ole Miss, and we'll do Terrace Marshall Jr. of LSU. Now, Yates, you've put 2 comps on these guys. For Moore, you've got Hunter Renfrow. And for Marshall Jr., you've got Denzel Mims. So talk to me about those comps and what you see of those players.
Yeah, Elijah Moore, I'm going to get a lot of flack for that one with Hunter Renfrow. But when I look at Moore's film, I see a very, very smart and intelligent slot receiver, one who's able to identify zones really well, sit down in them, give an outlet for his receiver or for his quarterback. And that's what Hunter Renfrow does. Renfrow and Moore's agility testing numbers are actually pretty similar. Moore obviously ran a ridiculous blazing 40-yard dash, which I don't see on tape. So I see a really, really good slot receiver. If Hunter Renfrow got the opportunity that Julian Edelman did in New England, I think that he would be very, very fantasy relevant because he's a good slot receiver. He's a smart, sure-handed receiver. With Moore, I think that he can bring you a little bit more juice if you get him the ball out in open space, but I just don't see him creating that same level of separation that some of these other slot receivers do. I just don't see that on tape consistently. So with Moore, I see a really, really good slot receiver. I personally would not be taking him in the first round. Probably wouldn't be taking him in the second round of the NFL draft, but apparently he's going 22 overall to the Tennessee Titans. So, but I see Hunter Renfrow very, very, it kind of matches up there with the athleticism.
And then for Marshall, you've got Mims. So your thoughts on him?
This is crazy. When you look at, let me pull this up, because when you look at Mims and Terrace Marshall's testing numbers side by side, it is uncanny. It is ridiculous. So Terrace Marshall and Denzel Mims side by side, 6'2" and 5/8, 6'2" and 7/8, 205 pounds, 207 pounds, 4'3", 840, 4'3", 840, 39-inch vert, 38.5-inch vert.
Wow.
10.5 broad versus 10.5 11 for Denzel Mims. 78 and 1/8 inch wingspan and 78 and 1/2 inch wingspan for the guys there. And that was Connor Rogers pointed that out of Bleacher Report. So that is just ridiculous where you look at these guys side by side and they are practically the same person. And I think that they're going to win in very similar ways in the NFL.
Now, Tags, you've got a different comp, which is DJ Shark, who is a player that I really like. And I know he's coming off a down year with the injuries, and obviously the quarterback play has been lacking quite a bit. But even in the beginning of 2019, you saw what DJ Shark could be in the NFL, and that was with Gardner Minshew. So obviously he's got potential here with the new quarterback, a franchise quarterback coming in to be more. So do you think Marshall has this kind of DJ Shark upside, or Shark hasn't really even shown his upside yet in the NFL?
I mean, Chark has flashed for sure. You saw him. He can operate as that number one wide receiver. Now, do they do that in Urban Meyer's system? I don't know how he's going to be used there. I don't know if Laviska Shenault's going to be that guy, but Trevor Lawrence is surely going to support.
Well, and Jones is there too. And we all know that Yates loves Jones.
You mean Jamar Chase? No, but in reality, DJ Chark was someone that I wasn't really high on coming out, and I think he surprised me in the NFL. He was someone that I was just wrong on my evaluation. Terrace Marshall is someone that I'm not particularly high on. I'm not low on him. I think he's a good football player, but I don't think he's elite like some people do. I think some people want to overrate him in this class because he's one of the only big wide receivers that you can get, in the not elite territory. When I watched the players like Justin Jefferson, like Jamar Chase, when I watched those guys at LSU, I didn't think it was just because of the system that they were in that they were producing. I felt like they were just really, really, really phenomenal talents. Whereas with Terrace Marshall, I felt a little bit different, where it was like he was benefiting from the system. I still think he's a good football player, but there's frustrations I see on tape. He's just not a very consistent wide receiver in terms of what he brings to the table on every single play. And that's worrisome with a wide receiver, especially in college, when basically it's just you play with heart in college. But DJ Chark, I do think that's his upside, right? I think it's possible that he's like a Josh Reynolds. I think that's possible, but I also think DJ Chark is in the realm of possibilities. It really does depend on where he falls, because if he goes in the second round, which is where I'm expecting him to go, he's going to get an opportunity to play, and I think he'll be perfectly fine. If he falls into the third, fourth round because of those ankle, foot issues or whatever it is that he had, I think then you're going to start to worry about him a little bit.
All right, we're going to flip the script here a little bit, because this next guy here is someone you're both very high on from all the mocks that we've done. Everybody seems very mad when the other person takes him. It's Dwayne Eskridge of Western Michigan. Now, what's funny here is Yates, you've got the high-end one here, and Tags is giving me something that makes me miserable, and I hate this comp, because if this is what he becomes, you've built it all up for me these last 2 months only to crush my hopes and dreams, because that guy can't catch the football. I want to start with the good one here. Yates, Will Fuller. Obviously, when Will Fuller's on the field, Will Fuller produces. It's the reasons he's on the field or not on the field, so to speak. So what is it about Eskridge that reminds you of Fuller?
Yeah, so I had Will Fuller in here as the comp, but then I actually just changed it right before we talked about it, Jost, and I went to Brandon Cooks, and it's actually funny because we got all three Houston Texans wide receivers.
Texans,
right. So Will Fuller, his speed, absolutely, that that checks out. But Eskridge is playing at about like 20 pounds heavier, or 15 pounds heavier than Will Fuller. Fuller's a little bit more slight than people realize. With Eskridge, he's playing at around 190 pounds. When you look back at the combine data, Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State coming out, same height. 1 pound difference between Eskridge. Cooks ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. Eskridge ran a 4.38. 36.5-inch vert versus 35. 121 broad versus 124. The numbers here really do match up here, and I think that's how Eskridge can win in the NFL. Brandon Cooks really is a really, really good wide receiver. He doesn't get the credit that he deserves, and I think that Eskridge is going to fly under the radar in this NFL draft. Leading up to it, I think that he's going to get round 2 draft capital, and I think that he can be very, very effective.
All right, Tags, you put Kiki QT on him, and that's just...
No. Don't get mad at Kiki QT.
I know. I want to get mad at Kiki QT. I've seen him drop enough balls. I can get mad at him. I think I've earned that. And I've never been a Kiki QT guy, but you want to talk about guys getting opportunities to show their stuff, right? He gets the opportunity, I would say, more than one. And every time, I think he's let everybody down.
I don't think so. I mean, Yates, you be the tiebreaker here. I don't think QT has gotten the opportunity to showcase what he can do in the NFL.
Yes, I will agree with you. I do not agree with you with the comp here for Eskridge as far as QT.
All right.
I liked QT.
Don't encourage Tags. Yates.
So I'm just saying that basically when I talk about QT, I liked him in that draft process, and I wanted to see him utilized in different ways. And then for whatever reason, Bill O'Brien, the genius Bill O'Brien, decided to lock him into a slot-only role, and he just never got that opportunity. When he has played in that full-time role, he has produced, and I think he can win in the slot. Dwayne Eskridge is not so much the slot guy, because I think you're missing a lot of his traits if you put him there. You could put him on the perimeter. He could beat press coverage as a former cornerback. He does go up for balls. Like, he's willing to fight for them. And again, if he beats press coverage, that eliminates a lot of the concerns that you have with some of those speedy wide receivers in the perimeter. His 40 time was less than I thought at his pro day. I wasn't extremely impressed with it, which lowered him down my board just a little bit. Obviously,
Eskridge?
Yeah.
4.38?
That was higher than I thought it was. I thought he was going to be a low 4.3 guy.
Okay.
I really did. No, I'm telling you.
4.38 is still flying.
No, it's still fast. But no. This year, all these numbers are inflated. They're all inflated.
For sure.
Can I just say this?
So that's more like a 4-4-2 to me.
You come for the football knowledge, you stay for the awkward silence between Tags and Yates. That was a beautiful moment of, well, it was this. It was like watching a married couple fight there for a second. Well, did you take him to his practice? Well, they said the practice was canceled today, but he still had to go to get his uniform. You know that, right? Well, yes, but he could pick that up next week, I think. Wow. I think we should just move on here because, I don't want any more awkward silences. Let's do these last couple wide receivers, and then we'll move on to some QB comps and some tight ends too, because I want to get everybody in here. We've got Wallace from Oklahoma State. We got Dyami Brown from North Carolina. Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. Yates, I'm just going to throw these three as a grouping out to you. You can give me your comps one at a time for them, how you see them, and we'll just kind of turn the page here from wide receiver to some of the other positions here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's fly through these. So Tylan Wallace, really, really solid receiver all around. Really, really great route runner. Fantastic hands, contested catchability for his size. Tajay Sharp lines up with the comparison here, where I don't think that either Sharp or Wallace has that like elite athleticism that's going to allow him to stick in the NFL. There are several times where you watch Wallace's film and you see him just bullied off the line of scrimmage, even moved out off of the sideline. So I just don't know if he has the athleticism or strength to be able to win in the NFL. Tajay Sharp, I think that Wallace is going to hang around in the NFL for a long time. I just don't know if he's ever going to be an impact player. Dyami Brown is getting a lot of hype out of North Carolina. It reminds me a lot of Gabe Davis coming out last year, where Gabe Davis wins a ton downfield, but Dyami Brown, man, his underneath stuff, he's got suspect hands, which is crazy because suspect hands in like the limited, like short area contested catches, but then he's able to make ridiculous catches deep downfield and contested and just deep ball tracking ability. It's all off the charts, but it's the stuff underneath. So I think that he's going to have to be utilized deep downfield as kind of a field stretcher. And I just don't know if that's going to be enough to push him. But I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. I just don't know if he's a first round or even second round talent. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Robert Woods. This is the comparison that jumped out to me when watching his tape. Former USC wide receiver. I've heard this now from several other people and respected NFL draft analysts. They ran like a 4.51 40-yard dash. Identical sizes. The only difference is that Amon-Ra actually ran a higher 3-cone drill than Robert Woods did at his pro day. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, going to be a very, very effective pro for a very long time.
All right, Tags, Wallace, Brown, St. Brown. Anybody really stick out for you on these guys you want to throw a comp on?
I like Tylan Wallace. I really do. And I want to see where he ends up because he's a very reliable wide receiver. And he's a receiver that some quarterback is going to love because he has reliable hands. Kylin Cole is the one that came to mind for me because Kylin Cole, if he walked into 100 plus targets, Kylin Cole's a baller. Like that, he can play. And I know Yates likes him quite a bit. Dyami Brown, James Washington, they're not the fastest players, but they get open down the field. James Washington didn't turn into what I think a lot of people thought he would. Dyami Brown, I'm not particularly high on him as him being like a breakout star or anything like that, but I think he can be a competent player in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I was going back and forth, and I looked at Yates' comparison. I'm like, Robert Woods, that's a high-end comparison. Then I'm like, well, it really comes down to where he's drafted and what team he goes to, right? Because you think about Robert Woods, I don't think people remember Robert Woods with Buffalo. He was nobody. Right. He was one of the least efficient wide receivers in football. They had him pigeonholed into a role, and then all of a sudden he goes to Sean McVay, and it's like superstar. And, Robert Woods, I think that's actually a good comparison. I don't think it's a bad one. St. Brown is not a can't-miss prospect for me. I don't think he's that guy, but I think that if he goes into a situation a la Robert Woods and he gets the opportunity like that, then yes, he can become a player like that. So I think it's a good count.
All right, let's move on to the quarterbacks. And this is my favorite comparison here, starting at the top with Lawrence, because I don't think there is a comp for him. And Yates seems to agree, and I think that's what makes him so special. It's you can comp and say, well, he's that high-end quarterback prospect that you could put the Peyton Manning things and the Andrew Luck things and all that stuff. But in terms of his game, I think it's very unique. He's incredibly gifted at a young age in terms of reading defenses, incredibly gifted in terms of what he can do on the football field in terms of his athleticism as well. A very good runner of the football on top of being a very good passer, and a confidence and a football knowledge at an age where you can come in and win a national championship as a in your first year. It's unbelievable what this guy can do, and we haven't even scratched the surface. So, Yates, you got nobody in here, and I agree. I think Trevor Lawrence is kind of on an island.
Absolutely. And again, this is more so looking at the play styles, right? I'm looking at the play styles and the body types and then trying to find the comp based off of that. And for Trevor Lawrence, there are players that are pocket passers at his size because he's 6'6", 215, I think. Like they're pocket passers, but there really isn't anyone who's going to present the type of running ability that Lawrence brings to the table. Like Lawrence absolutely could lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns sooner rather than later because he's got that ability around the goal line. And I think that is something that we have to talk. So there really isn't a comparison here where I look at Trevor Lawrence and I say like, yeah, that's his path for success at his height, at his weight, with his play style. There really isn't one that I can zero in on.
Tags, how about for you? Is there somebody that, Lawrence's style reminds you of? Because I'm kind of with Yates here. It doesn't remind me of anybody, and I think that's what makes him so special.
Well, there's a little bit of everything, right? You see some.
Yeah.
I definitely see some Peyton Manning in there in the touch that he has on the ball. I see some Andrew Luck in there as far as a prospect coming out being so pro ready like he is. I see a little bit of Justin Herbert as a taller type pocket passer with some mobility, but he has more mobility than Justin Herbert, and he can rush for 500 plus yards. It's just ridiculous to see a quarterback with this type arm and this type of accuracy and like this maturity.
Yeah.
Have that mobility to his game. Now,
he's like that meme, Tags, when you say, if you were making the perfect quarterback, you'd have this guy's head and this guy's arm and this guy's legs. And it's kind of scary, but that's kind of what Trevor Lawrence is.
That's why people have been waiting for him. And that's why it's like, it is tough to make a comparison with a player like that, especially as a rookie. Like if you want to compare him to players' careers and stuff like that, it gets easier, but it's tough because he's that well-rounded of a prospect.
Now, this next one, Jet fans, you better brace yourself because these comps are all over the board. And I hope for your sake they all work out. Zach Wilson from BYU. Yates, you've got Baker Mayfield / Aaron Rodgers in this comp list. So that is a wide spectrum. I think that is fair. And Baker's still, improving, I hope. It's a lowercase I, but still improving. Your thoughts here on the variance of Wilson?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. With Baker, that comparison comes down to the measurables and the size, right? Because that is where Zach Wilson is Baker Mayfield's body, essentially. With Aaron Rodgers, it's the comparison there of the throwing motion and just how natural of a passer he is. When you look at Wilson and you watch his tape, it's hard not to see that comparison of Rodgers as far as his throwing motion. He's got a lot to do before he can get to that level of accuracy, that level of precision passing, that intelligence that Rodgers brings to the table. But as far as, again, just looking at the play style comparisons, Baker and Aaron Rodgers, as far as Baker's build and then Aaron Rodgers' arm.
Now, I did go back to Yates here. Usually we're going back into thing, but I wanted to do that because I wanted to get some kind of positives here because one of these next comps that Tags is throwing on Wilson, you should, I think the hairs on people's necks are going to stand up. So, Tags, I don't even want to say it because you do it.
All right. So we all know that when Johnny Manziel was drafted, I think a lot of people thought that he was going to be a lot better than he was. He had all that potential and people loved him coming out of Texas A&M. But he ultimately never worked out. And I'm not saying that Zach Wilson's going to be that quarterback. What I'm saying is like coming into the NFL, I feel very similarly about the quarterbacks that I did, where it's like, I don't think that Zach Wilson's a can't miss prospect. I do think that he's got an ultra quick release. He can throw off platform in the way that Aaron Rodgers can, but he doesn't have the accuracy that some people are putting on him. When you watch him at BYU in the competition that he played there, things look easier. And I made this analogy on another podcast the other day. I said, if I were to go play basketball with a bunch of 8-year-olds right now, I would look like Michael Jordan to them. They'd be like, yo, like this dude, I want you on my team. But if I were to go play with a bunch of 25-year-olds, they'd be like, dude, sit out and don't play this game. That's how it would happen. And the Zach Wilson, I'm not saying that he can't make a jump because an NBA star would look like a star among 8-year-olds, but at the same time, he'd translate. I'm not positive that Zach Wilson's going to play that well against better competition. I believe that he took advantage of what he needed to. He stood out in 2020 in a year where they had terrible competition, in a year that a lot of players held out. There were so many factors that went into this breakout that I really can't understand why he's going number 2 overall, like a can't-miss prospect. Like, why isn't Justin Fields being considered there? Why isn't Trey Lance being considered there? Trey Lance had one great year, too, and he did it. I know he didn't throw the ball a whole lot that year, but it's like, what? And I don't know. There's a lot of ways I can go with this.
I want to support your confusion. Can I just say this is a safe place? I think you're right because I think that I don't understand why it's such a lock either. I don't see the lock that so many others do. So I get it. I get what you're saying, and I think other people really. I think it's kind of surprising that it seems like so locked in and so obvious that it's Wilson at 2.
Yeah, and I think Jay Cutler's another one that I can compare here just because of the physical tools that he had. Cutler should have been better than he was. Big arm, can throw off platform, can throw while running to the left. He has mobility to his game. He had a pretty quick release, Jay Cutler did. But again, Jay Cutler should have been great. Zach Wilson can be great. I hope he's great. I really do. For Jets fans, I think you guys need a quarterback that's going to be great, because it's better for the NFL when we have great quarterbacks, and we're looking for that next wave. I just don't think that Zach Wilson is an absolutely can't miss prospect.
Now, I hope you actually say what you've written down here today when we do the Justin Fields one, because I think it's funny. So Justin Fields, Ohio State quarterback, obviously great season last year for him. He's been a quarterback that people have been watching since high school with a lot of publicity. So in your opinion, what do you think he comps out to in the NFL level?
He's a worse Russell Wilson. I mean, I don't know how many players can compare to Russell Wilson, to be honest with you, because he's an elite player. He's a Hall of Fame player. I don't care that he's never received an MVP vote. He's a Hall of Famer.
Agreed.
Russell Wilson, so underappreciated. But Justin Fields, in terms of his accuracy, the spot on accuracy, the big arm to get the ball down the field, those things are great. That reminds me of Wilson in a lot of ways. Now, the reason I say worse, they both have mobility, obviously, but Justin Fields, when he feels pressure, he becomes a runner. When Russell Wilson feels pressure, he still keeps his eyes down the field while moving or navigating the pocket better than maybe anybody in the NFL. Does it extremely well. The part with Justin Fields that is worrisome to me, and NFL coaches would know better than I when it comes to this, how easy is it going to be to teach him to basically not have tunnel vision, because he has it at times. He will miss floating linebackers, floating safeties, and which make for easy interceptions. And we saw that a lot with a player I just mentioned in Jay Cutler, where it's like Russell Wilson, deadly accurate. He scans the entire field, whereas Justin Fields, I believe it's like this. They need it to widen as he gets into the NFL. And again, I don't know if that's a trait that they can teach. Maybe that's one of the concerns about Justin Fields. I have zero concerns about everything off the field they talk about. Justin Fields is a leader. I have no worry about that. My concern is the mental processing and the ability to scan the entire field.
All right. For you, Yates, when you look at Fields, what's the comparison that pops into your head?
It's really funny because with both Justin Fields and Trey Lance, they both have very similar builds. Where you look at Dak Prescott as the comparison there, where you're looking at the mobility that Prescott brings, but also a really solid arm, really accurate. Justin Fields brings that to the table. With Trey Lance, I can make that same comp, but if you want to go a little bit outside of that, Josh Allen for Trey Lance, we look at the running and mobility that Allen brings as a punishing runner too. Lance is willing to lower his shoulder. So Allen's doing it at a little bit of a bigger weight than Lance, there's like a 15-pound difference there. But with Justin Fields, Dak Prescott as far as the comp, and then Trey Lance, Josh Allen.
Now, you've talked a little bit before, and a lot of people keep comparing him to Josh Allen. I don't know if I've heard anybody make this comparison. I want to throw it at you guys, which is, to me, he reminds me a little bit of a more athletic even version, and this guy was pretty athletic to begin with, Dante Culpepper. And I think people forget how good Culpepper was. He's a bigger body quarterback too, bigger lower half, bigger legs. And he was dropped in a time in the NFL where the old school NFL was still going on. I think if you took Dante Culpepper and dropped him into today's game, it might be a very different story. We're talking about him, and he did have injuries and all of that. But when I'm looking at him physically, he has that kind of physical presence about him, Trey Lance. For you, the North Dakota State quarterback, are you seeing Josh Allen too, Tags? Because obviously, Yates brings up Josh Allen. I think a lot of people do, and they keep calling him raw and all this stuff, but it was the same stuff that I saw in Josh Allen that I'm excited about in Lance, which is, yeah, I want all the raw skill set. I want all the stuff that you can't teach, and then give me the kid who's a really good kid, who's really smart, who's got a high football IQ, because he's going to learn all the other things. I can't teach what that guy can do, but I can teach him how to do some of the things he does better.
Yeah, you can't teach some of the traits that Trey Lance has.
Just like Josh Allen, same thing.
Right, and I know that's why Yates loves Trey Lance. He could be a game changer. Now, does it mean that he's a can't-miss prospect? Absolutely not. I don't think that we could say that about many quarterbacks any year. I think people overestimate that every single year, thinking that everybody's going to translate. Trey Lance, obviously coming from a smaller school, not a team that plays the best of the best competition. He did not throw the ball a whole lot. I think he has under 400 career pass attempts in college. That's a little worrisome. So you think about Trey Lance and the fact that he needs to develop a little bit. Dante Culpepper, he's too sluggish for me. He was kind of fat in a way. Trey Lance is not fat. Josh Allen's a good comparison for him. I think Colin Kaepernick a little bit. They have that freelance style about them where he could drop back. He has that big arm, right? The accuracy can be questionable at times, but the mobility and what he does freelancing with the ball is fantastic. Like I think that he's more of Trevor Lawrence wants to throw the ball and then he can run. I think that Trey Lance is more of like, he might be the best mobile quarterback in this draft in terms of what he does once he decides that he's going to run the ball. He might be the best one. And so when you combine that with his big arm and you combine that with his size, and it's like, hey, this is a guy that if you have confidence in, you trade 3 first-round picks to get. If you actually believe that, like, because if he pans out, you're going to say, I don't even care what I gave up to get him, because he is that guy.
He's the franchise, right?
You don't do it for the next guy we're going to talk about.
Next guy we're going to talk about is Mac Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, come on down. Mac Jones, Alabama's own. You guys have been saying this, Tags. You've been saying Eli Manning for a while now on him, and that makes sense. I mean, Eli Manning was a good quarterback, and Eli Manning's got 2 Super Bowl rings. Eli Manning's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
No, he's not.
He's going to be. Whether you think he is,
he
is going to be in the Hall of Fame.
At any point in Eli Manning's career, would he have fetched 3 first-round picks?
He is going.
My answer is no.
Well, I mean, look, we can talk about his draft stock and his draft another time. We'll save that conversation.
His way out of San Diego.
We'll save that conversation for Thursday night. Maybe I'll force myself and somewhere. We'll see where we end up on another show on ESPN or NFL Network. I want to trade myself to this with 3 future draft picks. But you've got a comp on here, Yates, of Daniel Jones. So take me through that one, because this is again, if he becomes Eli Manning, okay. If he becomes Daniel Jones, this is not what you want to move up all those draft picks for.
Absolutely. And this comes with an asterisk because he's a less athletic Daniel Jones. Like, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones ain't breaking away for an 80-yard touchdown run. A 75-yard tripping run. So I think, with Mac Jones, like and Daniel Jones too, he has to have all the pieces around him. He's an incredibly accurate, smart football player, smart quarterback. And that's what Daniel Jones brings to the table. But he has to have all the pieces around him to be successful. And that's the same thing with Mac Jones. So I don't see it, man. I don't know why we're talking about him at number 3 overall. I sure hope that the 49ers do not take him. I think the fan base will revolt if they take Mac Jones here over Justin Fields or Trey Lance. But I think that Daniel Jones, when you're watching them, it really is like, it's really easy to see the comparisons, but then it's just Mac Jones doesn't bring that same level of athleticism.
I still don't know why we're not talking about the Jets, talking about Fields or Lance, but that's a story for another podcast. Right. Davis Mills of Stanford and Kyle Trask. Take me through your comps for those 2 guys, Kyle.
Kyle Lauletta for Davis Mills. Like, why are we talking about Davis Mills?
All right, we'll go right past. I don't want to make you upset.
Thank you. Kyle Trask out of Florida, Ben Roethlisberger, but this does come with an asterisk as well, saying that he does not have anywhere near the arm that Ben Roethlisberger does. But they stand at a very, very similar weight coming out of Miami, Ohio for Big Ben. So I think that Kyle Trask looks like Big Ben, but does not have anywhere near the arm talent that he did.
All right, now, Tags, for Kyle Trask, you've thrown Ryan Fitzpatrick out there. Your thoughts on this?
That's all I felt while watching Kyle Trask, was that I was like, yo, this is Ryan Fitzpatrick reincarnated. It's just maybe he doesn't have the Harvard brain.
I didn't know that. I never heard anyone say that before.
Did you know that Ryan Fitzpatrick went to Harvard?
I never knew that he went to Harvard. No one's ever mentioned that on a broadcast ever.
I mean, I'm glad you're waking up.
It's sarcasm.
I know you know. Sarcasm. Oh boy, we're missing on sarcasm all over the place. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, in the terms of DGAF level, it's very high with Kyle Trask.
All right, let's move on to the tight ends. Now everybody is, just continuously saying glowing things about Kyle Pitts, and how could you not? I mean, the measurables, the performance. I know, Tags, you've said a lot of Vernon Davis. Yates, you're saying Darren Waller. I've heard a lot of Waller. I just want to put it to both of you guys. Yates, I'm going to start with you on this one. Is Waller his floor? Like, is it a potential we're going to see something that's even better? I mean, I know that's kind of asking a lot because Waller's been outstanding, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
The offense matters.
Sure.
Because Waller is the number 1 option for that offense. And I think that Pitts, depending on his landing spot, if he lands in Atlanta and they don't trade Julio Jones, he's going to be the number 2, number 3 option there. So I don't know if he's going to have that potential to get there to where we're talking about him in the same vein from a fantasy perspective that Darren Waller is. So I don't know, man. It's going to depend on the offense here, but the talent level certainly dictates that he can be Darren Waller plus.
And I know, Tags, you've said Vernon Davis a bunch of times when it comes to Pitts, and people forget, once again, different style of the NFL 10 years ago, and Vernon Davis, a physical specimen, but you could do certain things you can't do nowadays. And if you drop Vernon Davis now into the NFL, I wonder exactly what he would look like in terms of fantasy value. I think it'd be very different. So I agree with you there. Anything else to add here with the Vernon Davis comparison?
No, I think you nailed that in terms of if Vernon Davis were drafted today, people would look at him like Kyle Pitts because he would be back then when he was drafted, teams were almost not willing to think outside the box and say, hey, can we use this tight end over here? Can we do this?
Right.
Nowadays they do. And that's why Darren Waller's a good comp. I think it is a good one, but I think Vernon Davis athletically it's basically Kyle Pitts.
Now, Yates, you've put a huge one here on Pat Freiermuth of Penn State. You put Kelsey on as a comp, and I know you've mentioned this on many mocks before, which is if Kyle Pitts wasn't in this class, we'd be talking a whole lot more about this kid from Penn State. And this is a very high comp, and you're the person who's checked us here quite a bit and brought us back to reality, which I appreciate, which I think is correct, by the way, for the record. Let the record show Yates is correct for kind of bringing these down to earth because not everybody's a superstar. But you believe this kid, obviously, from this comp could be.
It's more so, again, the play style and what they bring to the table. So Freiermuth is about 10 pounds less than Travis Kelce. But the reason why I make this comparison is because one of their contested catchability in tight windows. Freiermuth has the potential to just soak up targets at every level of the field and just be a reliable receiving option over the middle of the field. You can move him out to the slot like the Chiefs do with Kelce. They can be utilized in a very, very similar way. But the main thing and why I make this comparison is that Kelce at 260 pounds should not be able to move the way that he does. You watch with Kelce continuously pivot routes. You see him go one way like he's running a drag route, sink his hips, and then cut back the other way and give his quarterback a big target to be able to throw to. And smaller corners aren't able to keep up with that. They're not able to get inside positioning. Your linebackers are just going to go flying the other way because they got their momentum going that way. Freiermuth has that ability to be able to control his momentum and his weight so well that I think that he can get to the level of a Travis Kelce production-wise. Again, I don't compare based on production. I'm comparing based on traits and athleticism. And I think that Freiermuth brings that level of athleticism to the table where when I look at how Travis Kelce is utilized for Kansas City, Freiermuth can be utilized in a very similar way.
Now, for Freiermuth, you've got Hunter Henry tags, a good tight end in his own right. Maybe he hasn't had, the big seasons that we've been waiting for historically. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but what are your thoughts on these two?
All I can hear is that Yates said Pat Freiermuth's going to go top 5 over Jamar Chase and that he's Travis Kelce. That's all I heard.
Travis Kelce went in the 3rd round, so there's that. Darren Waller went undrafted.
I was going to say undrafted.
Stop being logical, Yates.
Kittle went in the 5th round.
No, Hunter Henry is the type of player that, the reason I said Hunter Henry is because do I think Freiermuth can be a producer in the NFL? Sure I do. Do I think that they're going to force opportunity his way? No. I think that he's a tight end that if he walks into opportunity, he's going to produce and people are going to think that he's good, or team, depending on the team he lands with, if they have a starting tight end in place already, he's just going to kind of fade into oblivion. I do think he's a solid football player, and I do want to see him get some opportunity, but I do not think he's someone you build an offense around.
All right, do you think Brevin Jordan is somebody you can build an offense around?
No.
All right, just put it out there. You've got the comp of Eric Ebron on him.
I don't even feel great about that because I think Ebron wasn't, he didn't live up to the hype, but Brevin Jordan, everything I hear about him is that teams don't like him, and he keeps moving further and further down draft boards, that they said that he might be an athlete, but they don't know if he's a football player. Those are exact quotes. So it's like, that's worrisome, and if he's going to fall into day 3, if you fall into day 3 as a tight end, I mean,
all right, so
it's bad.
For Brevin Jordan, Yates, you've got one of your favorite tight ends as a comp. So is this because of the measurables?
Yeah, it really is. But then it's also saying that he's a less athletic version of Jonnu Smith. And so the role that he's going to be asked to play in the NFL is going to be very similar to what Jonnu Smith has done for the Tennessee Titans and what he's going to do for the New England Patriots. So with Jordan, though, less athletic, really did not test well at his pro day. I have him still as tight end 3 in this class, but Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame is right there with him, who I think actually also compares very favorably to Jonnu Smith. So both of these guys, either Brevin Jordan or Tommy Tremble, are right there in that class. I would just say that Brevin Jordan, I couldn't find a better comp, just a less athletic Jonnu Smith.
All right, those are the comps. That's what they are. Everything from worse Russell Wilsons to we can't even put a comp on Trevor Lawrence. We've covered the gamut today, and we hope you've enjoyed the show. And once again, if you can't get enough of us, and I know that's the answer, I mean, obviously, of course you can't, So you got to watch us on Thursday night for the draft starting at 7:30. We're going to be there breaking it all down for you, fantasy style, so you can watch the draft, you can be with us, hang out. Again, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel Fantasy Pros. Click subscribe and get that notifications button. Tap that little notifications button. That way you know exactly when the show is starting, in case you forget and get caught up with real life stuff, which is silly because fantasy should be more important, and that's what we're trying to bring you here. We're going to have a great time on this show. I can't wait to do it. These two guys are just crushing it. Let me tell you, all their work, make sure you go read it on Fantasy Pros. They've done some fantastic mocks, some fantastic write-ups. This has been so fun. I feel like we're kind of at the finish line here a little bit, where it's like, okay, now let's have some reality, but I can't wait to do this live with you guys. I think it's going to be so much fun, and it's going to be really beneficial for everybody out there playing fantasy football in 2021. So make sure you go out there and subscribe to the YouTube channel. In the meantime, we got some more mocks that you can go back and watch and listen to over on our content at Fantasy Pros. Don't forget about our Justin Jefferson giveaway. Once again, thanks to our friends at pristineauction.com. You go, you take a screenshot, go to fantasypros.com/contest. You upload that screenshot of your review on Apple Podcasts or CastBox, and then you can get that Justin Jefferson autographed jersey. And I also want to go ahead and thank our sponsors of today's show, IPVanish. Go to ipvanish.com/pros and claim your 65% savings. They have plans starting at just $349 or all the way up to $3149 a year. Again, that's ipvanish.com. Use the promo code PROS when you go in there. It's ipvanish.com/pros. And don't forget about the Magic Spoon. I would not recommend mixing them all together like Kyle does. Don't do that. Be your own person. Go out there, get the Magic Spoon, get the birthday cake. Every day's your birthday. MagicSpoon.com/fantasypros. Grab the new limited edition birthday cake now. That's MagicSpoon.com/fantasypros. Again, save $5 off with that code FantasyPros. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Tags and Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.